Welcome back to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. I'm Jenny Rudolph, an organizational behavior scholar interested in everything that helps us interact with each other and gets in the way of our interacting with each other. This week, we will be talking again about how do you build team psychological safety using the ideas from Amy Edmondson's amazing book, The Fearless Organization. And specifically, how does a leader use a toolkit that she has put together for building team psychological safety? Today, we're going to be thinking about structures, repeatable, visible processes that make it easier for people to participate. And I'm sure we've all been in that meeting where the person running the meeting says, "Any thoughts?" And there is silence. Nobody shares their thinking. But afterwards, there's all this conversation in the hallway. There's all this conversation in the kitchen. Everybody suddenly has opinions. What happens in those contexts often is that people are just not clear whether disagreement is welcome, their point of view, even if it agrees, is important or needed. And they are making calculations all the time about should I or should I not speak up, should I or should I not participate, and a cost calculation about the benefits of that in the moment, the benefits of that in the long run, or the costs in both those contexts. And what Amy Edmondson and Jim Diedert's work has shown consistently is people tend to weigh the present moment cost of speaking up more highly than they weigh the later possible uncertain benefit to them and their organization of speaking up. And so most of us are pretty conservative and choose not to participate. So today we're going to be thinking about how to disrupt that pattern, how to make it more inviting, psychologically safe, and meaningful to participate in group processes. So how do we get there? I'm going to refresh with us the Leaders Toolkit that Amy Edmondson puts forward in the Fearless Organization. And as a reminder, she says, leaders of teams need to set the stage, invite participation, and then respond productively when people do share. And we've talked already about parts of setting the stage, which include framing the work, which is setting expectations, helping people know what structures will be used, clarifying why hearing from each other is so important. Setting the stage also includes emphasizing the purpose of what we're doing. Why are we even here? And we often focus on how to get there, but we rarely focus on we're doing this because we really care about having a better patient experience in the neonatal clinic, or we're doing this because we really want our customers to get XYZ product sooner, or we're doing this because we as faculty development people really enjoy seeing those light bulb moments go off in our colleagues as they learn new ways to teach. Those are the kind of purpose things that we as team leaders or team leaders that we are working with might share with us. We've started exploring how to invite participation, and we've talked a bit about how you demonstrate situational humility, which means like, I can be certain about the process that we're going to engage in today. I'm going to help us get through this resuscitation. I'm going to help us get through this meeting. I'm going to help us do these rounds. But I need your input. What am I missing about this patient? What am I missing about this product? Please let me know. Please speak up because I only have one perspective. That's an example of situational humility. And then we've also talked about practicing good inquiry, which is what kinds of questions we ask, rather than asking yes/no questions or guess what I'm thinking questions. Wouldn't it have been better to XYZ? Asking true open-ended questions, asking questions about how people see things. So, to have this strong team psychological safety, we team leaders or followers who can help our team leaders set the stage and invite participation. So today we're going to dig into the third part of inviting participation, and that is this idea of setting up structures and processes that make participation possible. And those tend to be being explicit about what are we going to do in this meeting while we try to determine what is the best way to decorate the new conference room if you're part of that group. Being explicit that we're going to start with brainstorming, then we're going to narrow down ideas, then we're going to decide through a process of voting. That would be being explicit about process in a meeting. And we'll also talk today about how clinical teams can be very specific about process when they're caring for patients. Why are these processes so important? It's because without them, people don't know how to participate, and every single moment they have to make decisions about, is this a safe moment for me to speak up? Is it not a safe moment for me to share my point of view? And we want to lower those costs so that we can get everybody's point of view in there. When a forum for input is not explicitly described, or there are no guidelines for how to have this discussion, people aren't confident that their point of view is welcome. And just as we can have that silent meeting, when there's confusion about that, we can have one of those meetings that looks like a four-way stop sign and nobody knows who's supposed to go first, who's leading, who's following, how are the decisions going to be made. So as we think about inviting participation as minimizing or reducing the costs of sharing your point of view, you can think about ineffective or bad practice, ordinary, customary practice, and then excellent practice. And ineffective or bad practice regarding participation often flows from an unintentional desire to efficiently and quickly manage some process. And in doing so, a leader may have some very clear ideas in her mind about how to take the next steps with respect to organizing the team. But they declare that next step in a way that ends up humiliating someone, blindsiding someone, and because they don't share their thinking, they keep their thinking opaque, people assume that that is intended, and it can trigger a feeling of fear and lack of power in the people who receive the opaque, unexplained directive. Even worse, sometimes some people have a theory of power and influence that relies on fear and relies on unilateral authority, and demonstrating that authority by taking someone down a peg in some way, or demoting them from a position, or shifting their position. And they may mistakenly believe that that opacity and that unilateral action preserves power. Maybe I shouldn't say incorrectly believe that it preserves power, because it may indeed preserve power, but it minimizes detection and correction of error, because people are going to be very reluctant to speak up or throw their hat into the ring at the risk of experiencing those unilateral actions by the leader. So there's two sources, in my view, of bad practice. One is kind of unawareness and lack of self-awareness and how one is coming across. And the other is an intentional authoritarian approach to leadership that can suppress people's willingness to speak up. Ordinary and customary practice, however, also can get on the wrong side of making it possible for us to speak up, because ordinary and customary practice generally focuses on task only. So we have to get the following budget completed, or we have to get the following marketing campaign done, and here's the steps that we're going to follow to do the work. First, we're going to identify our customers' voice and needs. Then we're going to develop a value proposition. Then we're going to write that into some web copy, and then we're going to put it up. That is all good, absolutely good to have those steps clear. But what's not appearing in that group organization process is how should people contribute? Once we are in the process of eliciting customer voice and I notice something new from our customers, how do I get that to you? How do I tell you about that? When do I tell you about that? And so normal and customary practice usually leaves out discussion of how to participate. So for example, going back to our silent meeting or our four-way stop meeting, what those tended to lack was, here's the goal of this part of the meeting, and here's the process that we're going to follow to get there. And here's what I need from each of you at each stage of that process. So I gave the example of brainstorming earlier. Another type of process is where people might all write down ideas silently together, and then they put them up onto some kind of a matrix. And then there are certain kinds of voting or weighting processes that let people know which is more important to each one of them. Anything that puts some explicitness on process often makes it easier for people to participate. So excellent practice with respect to inviting participation blends clarity about task and clarity about process. So for example, Richard Hackman, a teamwork researcher on whose work Amy Edmondson built, had several amazing books about how important goal and task clarity was for teams to get work done in a really great way. And what Amy Edmondson then added on top of that is clarity about the process of how the team works is also really important. And her paper, for example, that helped us understand situational humility by leaders, along with Ingrid Nembard, was about leader inclusiveness behaviors and inviting people's point of view. Another example of a structure that helps participation is that I, as a leader, name and carry out the following, which is, hey, folks, I need to hear from those of you who are seeing this really differently or are on a very different part of this team or are outside this team. Your view from the periphery could really change how we do what we're doing. And so I really am going to need to hear from you. And then later, I ask for their point of view. And then beyond that, I thank them for their point of view. Whether or not I exactly use it, I still need to let them know I'm grateful to have gotten it. So the value of these structures are that without the structure, every interruption could technically feel like it's politically fraught. Like, am I taking a risk to jump in? Disagreements, instead of being welcomed and understood as an important part of arriving at better and better ideas, all of a sudden seem really personal. And questions, so important to clarifying what is happening in the process, can feel risky, and so people don't want to do them. So excellent practice includes things as naming how the team is going to take the steps, clarifying things like decision processes, explaining how mistakes are going to be handled, stating that input is welcome and then welcoming it, and then normalizing adaptation and revision. I remember the former board chair of the Center for Medical Simulation Board Susan Chapman Moss often used to use the phrase, "May I make a friendly amendment to?" And I love that phrase because A, it highlighted that amending is useful. And B, it highlighted that amending can be friendly and caring as opposed to criticizing or denigrating the other person's idea. So let's pair together two things that we've talked about in inviting participation. One is the concept of situational humility, and that is my internal belief that I don't have the full picture, our team may not have the full picture, and there's value in getting alternative or additional viewpoints and critiquing the direction we're going or what we're thinking already. Situational humility also includes inviting input. I might be missing something. Could you speak up and share your point of view? If you see something I'm missing, please say something. It involves those good questions, such as, how do you see it? Or what else is important here? Open-ended questions. But the last thing we've been talking about right now is the value of structure in permitting and facilitating participation. And those things are often repeated. They are visible in what they're asking for, and then there are visible response patterns. And it allows us, if we do it consistently, to walk our talk that then uses the structure of our meetings, the structure of clinical care, the structure of different things to build microcycles of trust that gradually accrue to a pocket of culture where it's easier to constantly participate. So James, I haven't talked about name, claim, aim yet, and I'm fine if you decide to cut out some section of this because it's too long.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would be reasonable not to at this
Talk about
point.
name, claim, aim at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like you said, it's like, why introduce this idea if you can't explain it?
Yeah. So what I think I can do, so having heard you say that, what I think I could do is just do it really briefly and highlight the repeatability of it.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to the work out of the way.
Yeah, the idea, it's a known structure that
Yeah.
you can see what the structure looks like. You do it every time. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah. So I'd like to illustrate what we've been talking about with a team organization method that we've created over the years here at the Center for Medical Simulation called Name, Claim, Aim. And we primarily use and teach name, claim, aim to clinical teams, but I've used it for organizing a group of friends for a hike. I've used it for getting my daughter and her fiance and others together on how are we going to cook our Thanksgiving dinner. So it's a process that just makes thinking explicit. And what you do in that situation is you name the current situation. Often, maybe in a clinical context, there's been an important change in vital signs, or there's an important change in what needs to happen for the patient, or you're getting ready to cook Thanksgiving dinner. And you name, hey, guys, in the next 2 hours, we need to get the turkey all together and cooked. And so that's what we're going to do in the next couple hours, name. I notice that the patient's blood pressure has been going down, and this has been happening, and that's been happening. And so I think we have a problem, and it's diagnosis X. Claiming is assuming the role explicitly of organizing the team for now. So, hey, folks, I'm going to do my best to get us organized, but I'm going to need your help. That's inviting that input. Okay. And the okay, although it seems very informal, usually should include some eye contact. And that allows people to know you're serious, that you do want their input. And then aiming is, what are we going to do? What are we going to have this team do? So with the turkey dinner, hey, Gia, I'm going to need you to wash and prepare the turkey. Zach, I'm going to need you to work on the stuffing, and I'm going to do X. So that is aiming the team with the upcoming interventions you could imagine they might be quite different for a patient. The details of name, claim, aim are not as important as the fact that they give it an explicit structure of how to participate. And then when we recap and rename, re-aim, and invite feedback again, we are instilling and imposing in a positive way a structure that minimizes the cost to speaking up and maximizes people's ability to see the utility of contributing. As we think about inviting participation on our teams, it's helpful to recognize that team leadership is not just a matter of charisma or personal warmth or encouragement, though those things can help. It's also designing interaction patterns or offering interaction structures and patterns that help people think together under pressure and know how and when their participation will be useful. Whenever there's ambiguity about when to participate or share your point of view, it almost always suppresses voice. It almost always suppresses speaking up or participation because people make that moment-by-moment calculation that it's too risky. So the workout of the week this week is find one real-world situation where you can lower the cost of participation. That might be something like, hey, in this section of the meeting, we're going to do A, then B, then C, and I'd like everybody to chime in. Or we're going to do A, then B, then C, and I want to hear these people in the A section, these people in the B section, these in the C section, then we're all going to vote. But something specific about what people could do. Another example is this name, claim, aim style. This is what the situation is. This is who's going to be managing this part of the process. Could be me. And these are the steps we're going to take. This one real world situation where you can lower participation could be a meeting. It could be clinical rounds. It could be a family meeting that you have at home or a family meeting that is held in the ICU. It could be a patient care moment. It could be a resuscitation, or maybe it's a more managerial meeting, a project meeting. So one real world situation where you can lower the cost of participation. Thank you for spending time with me on Curious Now. Curious Now is produced at the Center for Medical Simulation by James Lipshaw. If you think these ideas about how to invite participation are helpful, you might be interested in our Simulation Leader Intensive coming up in August 2026, and/or our personal leadership coaching service led by me.